Totally Football Show. Today, Spurs, Igor to stress it was mutual consent as Tudor's tumultuous term terminated. Elsewhere, all white on the night at Wembley, World Cup playoffs, kick clashes and more to come on this Totally Football Show. And hello, listener. It's Monday, the 30th of March for us in the brand new, recently refurbished Totally Studio. I've got Daniel Storey, not able to enjoy it up on the big screen. How you doing, Daniel?
I'm well, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm going to ask everybody who is studio-based today to pick a favourite photo adorning the walls of the studio these days. Tom Williams, there's a couple of France-related ones. Are you going to stick to type?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, that would be the most predictable choice, wouldn't it? Quite like Pirlo v Zidane over here from the 2006 final.
Yeah.
So obviously,
the iconic image of that final.
I mean, the image that very much comes to mind when you think of that game. Zidane, yeah, looking like he's about to nut the ball rather than another player.
If only he knew what was to come. Duncan, there's a couple of mascots arms around the referee with an extremely large football, but I'm guessing that's not the one you're going to pick.
Nah, obviously Conte, Tuchel, handshake gate one over there in the corner is quite good. I don't like the Materazzi Rui Costa one because that's been seen on social media approximately 4 trillion times.
And there's a better version where Materazzi is leaning on Rui Costa's shoulder.
I quite like the Dudek one because, I mean, everyone knows he didn't really stay on his line, but you can see there, you can't even see the goal line. So, fair play.
The Athletic's Dan Kilpatrick's with us for the first part of the show to talk Tottenham. Does that mean that you're picking a quite poorly framed image of Jurgen Klinsmann?
Yeah, I mean, it's directly opposite me, and I'm here to talk Spurs, so I do feel duty-bound to pick Klinsmann. There aren't many others really catching my eye. Maybe Ronaldinho kind of adds a bit of joy.
It's quite the smorgasbord. There are some, kind of classic photos. We've also got Razor Ruddock during his Swindon Town era, which
that
is
storied
a
spell of his
period of time
career,
that I'd completely forgotten about.
All right, well, Daniel and I aren't going to pick one in protest of the fact that there is simply not a Nottingham Forest image to be seen. But Dan is with us to give us the view from the lane on the latest Tottenham tumult. We're going to start with a Spurs statement on Sunday. 44 days and out then for Igor Tudor. He lasted 5 days longer than one of his predecessors, Ange Postecoglou, did at Forest. 24 hours more than Liz Truss managed as Prime Minister. He's not the shortest reigning Tudor in English history, though. Apologies to the relatives of Lady Jane Grey for bringing up her 9-day tenure at the end of the Tudor period on the pod again. Igor's inevitable exit announced on Sunday afternoon, a statement which, amongst other waffle, said we can confirm it's been mutually agreed for head coach Igor Tudor to leave the club with immediate effect. We also acknowledge the bereavement that Igor has recently suffered and send our support to him and his family at this difficult time. Billy T on X pointing out Dejan Kulusevski last played for Spurs 3 managers ago. The next hire will be the 4th manager since his injury. He never played for 2 of them. We're going to get, Dan, to the person who looks like he's coming in to take Tudor's place shortly. But in terms of the outgoing manager, had to happen, had to wait an appropriate amount of time following the bereavement, shouldn't have happened in the first place. Does that about sum it up?
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. I think after the 3-0 defeat to Forest last time out, his position was more or less untenable. I mean, Spurs didn't just lose to a relegation rival at home. They got thumped by a relegation rival at home. It was really hard to see him carrying on after that. Then you add in this family tragedy that he's had in his own personal life. He obviously went back to Croatia straight after the game, has had the funeral of his father Mario since then. So I think it's probably fair to say that Igor Tudor himself now has bigger concerns than Spurs, and it just made sense for everyone to make a change. He has been a disaster. He is not the biggest problem. He was not the biggest problem at Spurs. He didn't start the rot at Spurs, but he's accelerated it. I've just done another Athletic podcast with James Horncastle, actually, and to throw James under the bus on a second Athletic podcast, he compared Tudor to Winston Wolfe when he joined Spurs, in that he comes in and he quickly and efficiently kind of cleans up messes. I'm trying to think of another kind of Tarantino character we can compare him to. I could only really come up with Mr. Blue, in that he was a very brief part of a major disaster, but quickly forgotten. Look, he came in with a mandate to make a quick impact, and clearly he has not done that. So I think this is the only decision Spurs could really make. I guess the there are a number of questions now, but one of them is, is it kind of too late to save the season?
If you were playing the blame game, who you're pointing your finger at more than anybody else? Players, board, Tudor?
Oh, the board, the hierarchy. I mean, the people in charge of the club would no doubt say, well, we inherited a mess from the previous decision makers, i.e. Daniel Levy and his inner circle. And obviously, there is a question as to whether ENIC, because I'm refusing to call them the Lewis family going forward, whether ENIC were kind of pulling the strings in the Levy era all along, or whether it really was different people making decisions. That's kind of irrelevant. The mess Spurs are in is because of the decision makers of the club, past and present. The biggest mistake I think they made was sitting on their hands for too long when it was clear that Thomas Frank wasn't working. I knew from the start of November as a Spurs fan and kind of Spurs watcher that it just wasn't going to work. I think around about the time Spurs meekly lost to Chelsea, I said to people, this guy's not a Spurs manager. Spurs have got to do something. That was certainly clear to me in November and to others. It was obvious in December. It was obvious in January. In February the 11th was too late to make that change. So they sat on their hands there. Perhaps if they'd have listened to Fabio Paratici and got Tudor in November, it would have been a different story for him and for Spurs. He would have had more time and more breathing space to kind of work his way and make an impact, as he has done at previous clubs. So yeah, the ultimate responsibility lies with them. I do think, having said that, there's a degree of responsibility for the players and obviously coaches past and present too. You have to say that this poor run of league form started under Ange Postecoglou and Daniel Levy. It did not start this season. Spurs were in free fall in the second half of last season, but that was masked by the Europa League win.
Where does he rank, Duncan, in terms of calamitous Premier League managerial appointments, or can we not say that definitively until we know whether or not Tottenham are Premier League or Championship next season?
Well, it sort of reminds me a little bit of when Sam Allardyce went into Leeds the year they went down, and
I had completely forgotten about Sam Allardyce going to Leeds until I read how does Igor Tudor compare to other short tenures?
Well, yeah, and Allardyce came in traditional confident style and said, winning games, that's what I do, and then proceeded not to win games. And it just feels like when you get to this stage of a season, I mean, there was once upon a time, a club having 3 managers in a season seemed outlandish. Forest are on to their 4th. And I think if you look at the bottom of the Premier League right now, I mean, it's a bizarre situation where everyone's kind of managed everyone down there. They're all in a sort of WhatsApp group going, who's got training this week? Well, we'll do that team. Yeah. So I think, I mean, what is interesting is who Spurs are appointing now, because, with what is it, 7 games to go, it's there's a lot of pressure, and we know that different managers can start differently, and if they go for De Zerbi, as we're led to believe it's going to happen, whether he can kind of change stuff quickly enough is a big question.
Great news for Les Reed, who for a very long time was only famous for having had the shortest Premier League managerial tenure and having not really done anything else in Premier League history prior to that. I know he hasn't lost it to Igor Tudor, lost it to Sam Allardyce, but at least he can, now perhaps finally.
Well, he was also famous for
Les Miserables, as he was
sacked on
magnificently dubbed
on Christmas Eve.
On Christmas Eve as well.
Well, I mean, I was at the game on the 23rd, the Carabao Cup. Well, it wasn't Carabao in those days, but quarter-final, Wickham beat League 2. Wickham at the time beat Charlton, and that was enough. The axe fell.
This is slightly straying into he's 27 until he's 28 territory, but there is some debate about how
43 or 44
you measure the days. Do you count the day he was appointed and the day he was sacked? Which in my mind you do. But then the argument is, if someone was appointed yesterday and sacked today, that's one day. But my view is that that's the only circumstance where that works. And even if you're appointed Monday and you're sacked Wednesday, you've done 3 days. So there is some contention, but it doesn't change the fact that I think Postecoglou now has the shortest reign. Or is it still Allardyce?
Still Allardyce,
right?
Well, Stellini, but he's not a permanent. So
he was, I think he was interim.
He beat Allardyce by a day. But I mean, let's be honest. None of them are coming out.
Got another one in there.
Yeah, none of them are coming out with a badge of honour.
Not particularly. No. We'll get on to De Zerbi shortly. Last word on Tudor to you, though, Daniel. How damaged is his reputation by this, or can he just sort of say Spurs, innit?
I mean, I suspect that's exactly what he will say when he has meetings with clubs who are not Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, I thought it was dreadful. And a dreadful idea from the start. I didn't get it. I know he had this firefighting reputation, but to me, that firefighter reputation always traditionally felt country dependent, right? So you weren't just a firefighter, you were a Serie A firefighter or you're a Premier League firefighter. And that's how it's always been. And I think that's probably, judged on this reign and others, how it'll always stay. So I guess he'll go back to Serie A or maybe back to Liga and try again. He won't be damaged long term because whatever happens at Spurs, Dan's just said it. Everybody knows it's the hierarchy that is to blame. It's not his fault that he was offered a job that he took. He did do it really badly, and he did do some really strange things in terms of tactics and in terms of like PR, how he talked about the club. But yeah, I mean, it goes way beyond him. And yeah, he'll probably go back to Serie A and he'll be managing Lazio again or someone like that soon.
The latest reporting, as we have it on The Athletic from Jack Pitt-Brooke on Monday lunchtime, is that Roberto De Zerbi is likely to be appointed as the third head coach of the season. They've offered him a long-term contract, significant financial package. It would make him one of the best-paid managers in the Premier League. Several Spurs supporters groups have voiced their reservations. Dan, you've always also got doubts about De Zerbi.
Yeah, I think it's a high-risk appointment and probably not worth it, ultimately. So I'm always wary of kind of ascribing a view to a fan base as a whole. There will be a lot of different views and opinions on De Zerbi within the Spurs fan base. Of course there will. But what we know is these three groups, so Spurs LGBTQ plus Supporters Association, their Women's Supporters Association and Spurs Reach, I think are their kind of ethnicity and cultural heritage official Supporters Association, have all come out and said no to De Zerbi and kind of urged the club not to pursue him as a manager. So we know that. And look, putting aside what Mason Greenwood did and putting aside what De Zerbi has said or has not said or has done and has not done over Mason Greenwood, Spurs have a major disconnect between fan base and club. It's never been greater in my adult lifetime. And it is a major problem, and they're not going to move forward as an organisation. They're not going to be successful unless everyone's on the same page and pulling in the same direction, and there's kind of alignment and a clear direction of travel. And if Spurs appoint De Zerbi, who is by no means a sure thing, by the way, he's not guaranteed to save them from relegation, they are going to immediately alienate a section of the fan base. It may be a small minority, but it's still going to be a section of the fan base who are never going to accept this guy. And I think that's a major problem, and I think for that reason they shouldn't do it. Now, there's no manager, arguably, apart from possibly Pochettino, who would unite everyone in the fan base. But let's say if it was Oliver Glasner or Silva or Iraola, for the sake of argument, there would be some supporters who would say, I don't like this guy's personality, he's too combustible, or I don't like his tactics, he doesn't play great football, whatever. But there wouldn't be supporters who were fundamentally opposed to those guys on a kind of values level and say that I will never accept him. And there will be supporters who will be thinking that about De Zerbi because of what he said or they perceive, positions he's taken. And I just don't think, frankly, I just don't have the energy for it. Like Spurs have had, a succession of culture war managers. Ange was a culture war manager, massively split the fan base down the middle. Mourinho was a culture war manager. Conte was a culture war manager. They haven't had unity in their fan base behind a manager really since Pochettino. As a Spurs fan, I'm just kind of exhausted by it. I think a lot of fans are just exhausted by it. And I don't think they should do it again. And it's kind of baffling that the hierarchy haven't learned this lesson. Adding into the fact that De Zerbi's tactics, while exciting, are kind of pretty prescriptive, aren't they? And there's no guarantee that he's going to come in and, teach this broken and fragile group of players to kind of bait the press or, whatever it is he's going to try and tell them to do and get results in 7 games. So I think this is extremely risky and, frankly, misguided pursuit. And as we sit here now, we don't know if they're going to be able to persuade him, to take the job. And I kind of rather hope they don't, to be honest.
How was he viewed in France at the start and end of that spell at Marseille, Tom? Because obviously that's his most recent posting. De
Zerbi's Marseille spell went exactly as I think everyone predicted it would, in that he comes in and has a full pre-season to work with the squad. Loads of new signings arrive at the same time. Very quickly gets Marseille playing really exciting football, gets the fans on board. And first season, a multitude of ups and downs and mini crises and genuine crises, but the season culminates in him qualifying OM for the Champions League automatically, which was, the main target that he had. And then inevitably in the second season, everything just blows up. And we know the double-edged sword that a De Zerbi managerial tenure brings. Chances are the football will be really exciting. The players will buy into it. The fans will find it exciting. But he has a way of just grinding people down, grinds the players down, creates this atmosphere of permanent tension. And what didn't help at Marseille was that he was surrounded by senior figures who were similarly emotional and reacted to setbacks, sometimes even monumentally minor setbacks, in very emotional fashion. So you have this constant feeling of chaos, this sense that at any given moment the whole thing could just explode, and inevitably it did. I think that the one thing that you would say in De Zerbi's favour, looking back at his time at Marseille, is that there was this constant churn of players, constant turnover, incomings, outgoings. A player comes in, is flavour of the month for less than a month, and the next thing, just you never see him again, and then he leaves a couple of months later. So he was constantly building on shifting sands. So you had this just permanent instability, which was exacerbated by the fact you had this extremely emotional coach. I think the problem with regard to Spurs at the moment, well, one of the many problems with regard to Spurs at the moment, is that the Spurs job right now is the ultimate poison chalice. I think no matter who you are as a coach, the thought of coming in and having 7 games to turn this oil tanker that is heading straight for the rocks around, and knowing that the reputational damage that could be caused if you don't succeed, is something that will weigh extremely heavily. There are coaches who could come in the summer and, given a full pre-season, will be able to begin to turn things around, but I think the chances are they're not going to want to accept the job now in the hope that they're still a Premier League club.
Wants, right? He wants the job in the summer, provided Spurs stay up, and he's saying,
which you can understand.
Yeah, which you can understand.
Yeah, he doesn't want to know that he's got to go to Lincoln.
Precisely, and Spurs have made this mistake before. Conte didn't want the job in the summer of 2021. He'd just left Inter. He wanted a break. He wasn't really that. I don't think he saw Spurs as a good fit for him, sort of culturally. And Nuno came in, was a disaster. Spurs sacked him, and then went back to Conte with a improved offer. Conte was a bit bored, I think, by that point, thinking, I could do with something to do, and they kind of persuaded him to take the job, and we know how that ended. And they're kind of making the same mistake again. It's like, this guy doesn't want the job right now, but you're presumably hoping to make him an offer he cannot refuse, and that's bringing in a coach who is immediately kind of starting on the back foot in an environment that he doesn't really want to be in.
And you look at Spurs fixtures as well. I mean, first game would be Sunderland away. Not easy.
No.
Brighton at home then, which narrative drifting off that. And then Wolves away. And we know Wolves are one of the best teams in the Premier League right now. So,
and Spurs always lose at Wolves.
Yeah.
Ouch. Daniel, how Spurs relegation rivals likely to view this appointment if indeed it does happen?
Intrinsically, if they get take the fans out of this for the moment, and Dan's absolutely right to talk about firstly talk about those fan groups. It's completely relevant, but putting that to the one side, I think if Spurs get what they feel they want, that's probably bad news for everybody else. The clanging irony to that is Spurs getting what they want has only led to Spurs getting worse and worse over a period of about half a decade. So, that's also relevant. I think the De Zerbi thing's fascinating, right? Because Lewis Dunk did an interview where about a year after he'd joined Brighton, after De Zerbi had joined Brighton, where he said the first few weeks were incredibly baffling. We just couldn't cope. We didn't really know what to do in training. It was really hard to get to grips with this football. But look at us now. And yet, obviously, De Zerbi's first few weeks are going to be the most defining weeks in his job, unless something extraordinary happens. If they go down, he has a decision to make about whether he stays, and at that point he has a 4 years, 9 months left on his contract. As we're told, it'll be a 5-year deal, which is extraordinary. So it's a kind of emblematic of everything that Spurs are now, that a 5-year deal would be basically determined success or failure within 7 games, and that they are in this position at all. I honestly thought that they would turn to Ryan Mason for the third interim spell, just to try and limp themselves over the line. And I think if they'd have done that rather than Tudor, I think they would have probably stayed up. I think there would have been enough goodwill within the squad that maybe that would have, the kind of arm around the shoulder, I've been here before, I've done this before, might have worked. But they obviously felt that that was too much of a risk. But then, financially, De Zerbi is a huge risk if you look at the money that he's reported been offered and the length of the deal. So, yeah, if I'm West Ham and Forest, none of us know what to think, right? We're all just kind of desperately trying to pretend the other clubs don't exist and focus on our own form. I am glad that, as a Forest fan, that we played Igor Tudor's Tottenham rather than new manager X's Tottenham, because that felt like something awful. It never felt that was going to work, and so that would be my only feeling.
Well, it's looking like it'll be De Zerbi. It's definitely not going to be Jermaine Defoe. He's taken the Woking job, the chance to work with the sons of Jussi Jääskeläinen and Darren Caskey and Jermaine Pennant's nephew. Impossible to resist for any others, but particularly for Defoe, it turns out. 1-1 between England and Uruguay at Wembley on Friday. A friendly at the business end of the domestic season in front of a disinterested crowd. Let's test our panel's mettle then by seeing how much content we can spin out of this. If nothing else, Daniel, it was an eventful evening for Ben White.
Yeah, it was. Provided a little drip of narrative that it's fair to say the evening needed after 78 minutes. It was really desperate. It was boring. It was sort of sold as, Marcus Rashford's at least done himself a favour. And I thought, yeah, that's just because he beat one guy once on the left wing, isn't it? It was that sort of night. It was, without wanting to kind of dig up old graves, which I will now proceed to do, there was this sense, I think, that when England got a new manager, everything was suddenly going to be exciting and everyone was going to look forward to the home qualifiers and the friendlies were going to be pop, bang and whistle. And other than some pretty physical challenges by the Uruguayan players, it just had none of that. There was no interest in the game whatsoever. It was badly timed. It was a bit odd, Tuchel just pacey picking the reserve squad and saying, someone show me what you can do, because the reality is that those players will show what they can do when they're surrounded by the first team, not when they're surrounded by each other. So it just felt a really kind of compartmentalized, deconstructed football match, which was pretty horrible to watch for everybody involved.
Yeah, there's strong Umbro Cup energy to this international break with Uruguay and Japan, and or Japan, as was contractually obliged to pronounce it. Yeah, we didn't learn anything. The players would be better off with a couple of weeks holiday. Daniel said it there. We're not learning anything at this point. We're just trying to avoid injuries. And to be fair, Uruguay didn't help on that front. So if Phil Foden's learned how to dodge Matrix-style challenges at the World Cup from that, then maybe something came out of the game.
Been an interesting window in the sense that we're not used to these inter-confederational friendlies anymore, because the gaps in the international calendar that used to exist for friendly games are now taken up by the Nations League. And so I think as a consequence, we've forgotten quite how desperately dismal an awful lot of these matches are. I've been to more meaningless England home games than I can care to remember. And I sat down and watched this.
As an England fan?
Not as an England fan. Obviously, Duncan, thank you for checking.
Not taking us under your wing now for the summer?
No chance. You'd be well down the list, believe you me. But I put this on, I was like, okay, it's England friendly. Uruguay are interesting, see what it's like. And within 5 minutes, just you get lulled into that England home friendly routine, the disinterested crowds, the paper aeroplanes start flying.
The paper aeroplane thing is...
It's like the New Mexican wave, but it's specific to Wembley.
Worse. But you say crowd, but 80,000 people turned up for it. And I can remember the 90s when these sort of games, I remember going to England, Nigeria before, in, I think 1995. So in that period where England had no competitive games because they're, hosts of the Euros. And I think there were 32,000 people there, and a similarly dreary 1-1 draw, if I recall correctly. And so, yeah, financially, fair play to the FA, because they keep managing to convince a lot of people to come and see these games, but I'm not entirely sure why. or how?
They managed to convince a lot of people. England struggling to convince players to stick around. 8 have left the camp. Ramsdale, Tomori, Calvert-Lewin, Stones, Wharton, Madueke, Rice, Saka. Is that 8 probably? Daniel, out of all of those, Adam Wharton may be the most significant. He just always seems to be injured in and around international duty, and James Garner did all right on Friday, which might concern Wharton.
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of resonating quote from England Uruguay was Thomas Tuchel describing Garner as the kind of mini Valverde, which is a whacking great compliment and is probably evidence that he has jumped slightly up the queue. I don't know if it'll be ahead of Kobbie Mainoo yet. I think it probably might be ahead of Adam Wharton now, just because of availability. And Wharton's availability has been an issue at club level this season as well. I think Anderson and Rice are the 2 starters, and we may well get a chance to see Anderson alongside Mainoo, I suppose, against Japan, with Garner coming on possibly to kind of show what he can do next to him. Rice is obviously a shoo-in to start. I think Anderson's a shoo-in to start, but Garner is really useful for international managers because that versatility of position is huge. He's played at fullback for Everton. He's played at central midfield. He's played a slightly advanced role in that central midfield if he's needed to. So he is multi-positional, and international managers love that. And it sounds like Thomas Tuchel is making him kind of one of his teacher's pets.
Yeah, on those withdrawals, Tuchel going down the I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed route, which always hurts more, doesn't it? It's Japan on Tuesday. A Japan side who beat Scotland 1-0 at Hampden on Saturday, a result which was greeted by boos from the Scotland fans at the final whistle. Steve Clarke, animated as ever, said it was disappointing. It's just the modern way. It seems if you lose a game, you get booed. You've just got to deal with it. He's going to be hoping for some big Dickinson energy when his side take on Ivory Coast at Everton's newish stadium on Tuesday. I always like it, Duncan, when you get a random venue for an international friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I think Loftus Road is a strong contender for
Craven Cottage, last
the odd Craven Cottage as well. Yeah.
MK Dons. We don't like that they exist in some respects, but they do often provide a home for internationals. But yeah, I mean, Scotland v Ivory Coast in Liverpool. It's a good combo. And yeah, I think it's a bit harsh getting booed. Japan are quite good, aren't they? Good kit, at least. So what does Scotland expect?
We'll see how they get on Tuesday night and whether it's greeted by cheers or boos. Elsewhere in friendly news, Senegal paraded their AFCON trophy ahead of their friendly against Peru, despite being stripped of the title. Tom, you enjoying rubbernecking on all this silliness?
I mean, it is grimly fascinating. And I was going to say that everyone involved is basically just holding their breath until the Court of Arbitration for Sport rules on who has actually won the Africa Cup of Nations. But I don't think that will make all that much difference anyway. Like the fact that it was stripped from Senegal so long after the end of the tournament was farcical in and of itself, and any subsequent decisions are only just going to add to the farce. I think everyone who witnessed what happened, anyone who paid any attention to the tournament will remember that, Senegal won it on the pitch, that they got the trophy, that they had the party. And even if Morocco do go down in the history books as African champions, it will feel hollow for them. I think it will feel hollow for everyone else. And in the meantime, you just get these extraordinary scenes like the ones that we saw, prior to the game against Peru, when a country celebrates a success that theoretically, never actually happened.
CAF General Secretary has resigned amid the controversy, trying to cover it as retiring. Sort of tiring talking about it, Duncan, in a way, isn't it? I think should we just say that Senegal won it and just ignore the last couple of weeks of discourse?
Well, I've got a lot of respect for Swiss-based bureaucrats, so as a cycling fan, I've got plenty of experience of CAS stepping in to decide stuff. But yeah, I mean, clearly Senegal are the people's winners.
There were some fun scorelines elsewhere, friendly-wise. 7-goal thriller between Switzerland and Germany. 4-3 it finished to Germany. Great goal from Florian Wirtz in that one. Austria beat Nigeria 5-1. Carney Chukwuemeka scored on his debut after switching his international allegiances. And France beat Colombia 3-1 in Maryland on Sunday afternoon. Desiree Doué with a brace. Anything much to learn, Tom, French-wise, from wins against Colombia and Brazil?
The main takeaway from this international break is that France are very good. I think we knew that already, but they put out a completely different starting 11 against Colombia compared to the one that started the game against Brazil, and in some ways looked even better. I think a big challenge for Didier Deschamps in the build-up to the World Cup has been to make France a proper attacking team, which we know is not really one of his strong points, because if you go back to Euro 2024, yes, France reached the semi-finals, but they did it having scored one solitary goal in open play and having relied an awful lot on penalties and own goals. And we know that the talent pool that France are able to pick on in attacking areas is terrifyingly deep, and that made what happened at the last Euros even more puzzling. Now when you watch France, they look a lot more like the sum of their parts, and the key decision that Deschamps has made has been to shift the system to a 4-2-3-1, to put Michael Olise at number 10. It'll be Kylian Mbappe up top, unsurprisingly Ousmane Dembele on the right, and now there's a bit of a battle for the one remaining slot on the left wing. Uruguay Kitike was really impressive against Brazil, scored a beautifully taken goal, dovetailed very nicely with Mbappe. So he is staking a very strong claim to be a starter. But Desiree Doué is another candidate. Marcus Thuram could start there as well. Doué scored a couple of goals against Colombia last night, and he was lining up alongside Ryan Cherki, who was the understudy to Michael Olise, Magnus Akliouche, who was the understudy to Dembele, who was brilliant, and with Thuram up top. And Thuram was brilliant, scored the second goal, set up the third, and France still look a little bit flaky defensively, but they look much more menacing in attack in a way that, you know, when you look at the names on paper, they should be. The only other thing to add is that Maxence Lacroix of Crystal Palace made his first international start, having been brought into the squad after William Saliba dropped out through injury, another Arsenal withdrawal, and he was extremely good. Got an 8 out of 10 from L'Équipe, which is pretty much as good as it gets. And the feeling is that he, you know, if there are any withdrawals higher up the centre-back food chain, he's now best placed to profit from that.
Yeah, I watched the Brazil-France game, and Tom's right, they did look very good. Michael Olise looked ridiculously good. So, you know, the former Reading winger. But the other thing that was really noticeable from that game was the cooling breaks, the sponsored cooling breaks. Was my first experience. And I mean, slightly hilarious that it was about 11 degrees Celsius. So not sure much cooling was required, but it was, yeah, they were sponsored by different things in each half, which, and it really did break up the game. And they didn't really add any time on for it as well. So the first half had, I think, 2 or 3 minutes of stoppage time, and the cooling break took at least 3 or 4 minutes.
It's like a classic sort of like FIFA facilitated modern football thing. A shit idea that no one asks for, that no one wants, that makes the thing that you're watching, whether you're a fan or a TV spectator, worse. That is totally pointless, and yet it's just been introduced without anyone getting a say, and will probably end up just being introduced to all football for the rest of time. So, you know, thanks, Infantino. I'm going to blame him, even if he's, I mean, you know, ultimately the buck stops there, doesn't it? Let's face it.
US MNT time. Felipe Cardenas joins us from Atlanta. Felipe, Mauricio Pochettino's team beaten 5-2 by Belgium on Saturday evening, or were they? If you watched it with the sound off, you might have struggled to make out which team was which. That kick clash was quite something.
It was, and it was funny because when the teams came out in their anthem kits, their anthem jackets, you know, it just looked like, you know, we're getting ready for a traditional friendly match, right? And as soon as they ripped off their anthem jackets and ran onto the pitch, you know, some of them sprinting to get in form before the kickoff, everyone in the press box looked at each other like, what is going on? Like there's a complete clash here. And so that became the story of the first half, and it completely overshadowed probably the best first half of football for the U.S. men's national team under Mauricio Pochettino. It was crazy that became such much more of a story than the football. But yes, you know, you step back and you realize that, you know, sometimes even adults can make mistakes that kids don't make these days. Everyone takes their second kit to their match, even in junior football. So yeah, that was a bit of an embarrassment for both federations.
So if the first half was good, then what on earth happened after half time? And was it a bit of a reality check for Mauricio Pochettino's team?
It was, and Pochettino mentioned he used that exact phrase in his post game comments to the press. It was a reality check. I think for him, having said before the game in a separate interview that the goal for this U.S. team was to get to the semifinal of the next World Cup, and then being completely, dominated in that second half in front of a very partisan home crowd in Atlanta, a market here that really wants to embrace the U.S. national team. It was a very, very deflating loss. And I think what happened, the first half was very good for Mauricio Pochettino. I think tactically he understood that the Belgians were going to play with a very high line, and they did. And that allowed Anthony Robinson and Timothy Weah, both playing as both left back and right back, to just streak up the field. And it really was working, and it led to the corner kick that then Weston McKennie converted to give the U.S. a 1-0 advantage. But it didn't take very long for the Belgians to equalize. And then the second half, the tactics, I think Belgium, Rudy Garcia, the manager, really adjusted. He went into a mid-block, and then he just told his dynamic winger Dooku to just go out there and harass Timothy Weah 1v1, and he did it relentlessly. And I think tactically, and then from an individual quality perspective, you really did see the disparity there between the two sides.
Semi-finals might be optimistic. What do you think would be a realistic placing for the USA at the World Cup?
I think it's more of a quarterfinal berth. This team is talented, but they're not what I think some of the truly diehard U.S. fans believe they are. A team of players that, yes, are now fully, they've played a World Cup. They are mostly European based. That gets this fan base really excited. But you forget what a World Cup is all about. It's faster. It's more athletic. These teams are just as good from an individual perspective, if not better, from some of the best players that the U.S. has, man for man. And now with this 5-2 loss in Portugal coming up, there's a lot of doubt about this. Can this team really make a run? I think the World Cup is a totally different animal, for a host nation, and I really do think that that's going to be an advantage for the U.S. But it's not going to be just a walkthrough in this group stage. I still think that Paraguay opener in Los Angeles is really tricky, and obviously we're waiting to see if who gets through as that fourth team. And it looks like it could be Turkey. They seem the stronger side in this playoff, but that'll complicate things for the U.S. as well.
All right, before we let you go, then Felipe, just tell us, how does the thermometer read in terms of World Cup fever in the US just now? It's been a fairly tumultuous build-up in various regards. Are people generally excited for the tournament starting?
I think this match window has turned the volume up a little bit on what is coming this summer. But, I had a conversation yesterday with somebody, a producer at another outlet, and she asked me the same thing. And I said, I think the American market is always slow to embrace an international event, even one that they're going to host. And right now, that's still what it feels like. I think from a football perspective, yes, this FIFA window makes it feel more important. There's a lot more international press here covering the United States. And obviously Belgium and Portugal just sort of ups the ante in terms of opposition. But it doesn't feel like the country's buzzing yet for this World Cup. It will feel like that, I believe, come end of May and June, because that's what this country does. As soon as the lights turn on and they're the brightest, they really do deliver in terms of organization. But right now, it just feels like this U.S. team. And when you lose like this, it does, like I said, is a bit deflating. But the U.S. market is just waiting for June, I think, for this World Cup.
Yep, it'll come around pretty quickly, I'm sure. Felipe, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Anytime. Have a great one. Take care.
All right, then. Tuesday, who's going to be punching their metaphorical ticket to the World Cup, and who's going to be making alternative plans for the summer? Headline act for many, European-wise, Bosnia and Herzegovina versus Italy, both fresh from breaking home nation hearts, eliminating Wales and Northern Ireland as they did on Thursday. Are you okay to talk about this now, Tom?
Yeah, go on.
Who do you make as favourites?
I think it has to be Italy. I think the fact that they won their semi-final in such convincing fashion suggests that they are in the midst of putting their World Cup qualification playoff ghosts to rest. But then again, the fact that it's in Bosnia, that you'll have, all the usual difficulties that kind of fixture tends to throw up, hostile crowd, etc., etc. And Bosnia were very solid against Wales. They were quite happy not to have the ball. They sat pretty deep in a 4-4-2 structure defensively, looked for opportunities on the counter-attack, didn't create a huge amount of chances, but ended up getting the one goal that they needed through Edin Dzeko right at the end to take it to extra time, and then held their nerve in the penalty shootout. So they're a pretty seasoned unit. I suspect Italy will have too much for them, but I think it'll probably be pretty cagey.
What do you reckon, Daniel? The home advantage maybe nullified by their respective exploits, Italy in third gear and Bosnia having gone all the way to extra time, or is there too much time between the games for that to be a thing?
I actually think home advantage is really big in these 4 games, particularly for Bosnia and for Kosovo. A kind of fevered atmosphere, I think, is going to really help. With all these games, or particularly with this one, but particularly the Bosnia-Italy one, the first goal feels absolutely massive. I know that Bosnia trailed against Wales and scored late. If they score first against Italy, I can just see Italy's kind of heads going. I didn't think they were great against Northern Ireland. They did enough, but first half they were really poor. It's just that Northern Ireland didn't really have enough to trouble them. If Bosnia have got enough to trouble them, then yeah, maybe. And Edin Dzeko is obviously still the spearhead, 40 years old. Ridiculous that he is still going and doing what he does. So there is a very good, kind of really nice narrative there. Yeah, I suspect Italy go through, but I think maybe Italy on pens or Italy in extra time, maybe.
Obviously, the Italian players celebrated Bosnia winning the shootout against Wales, so they obviously fancy it. But, can you pin a video on a wall? But maybe that will happen.
Well, what does the World Cup need more? A 40-year-old palish striker struggling in the sun of the USA or the Italian national anthem?
Speaking as a 40-ish something guy who's probably going to struggle a bit in the sun, I quite like the thought that there's going to be someone doing that out on the pitch. I think that would make us all feel good about ourselves. I mean, I think from a neutral perspective, this ha-ha Italy thing has probably gone on long enough. We could do with them being back in the tournament, but got to go and prove you're good enough.
You surely do. Meanwhile, over in Path D, Czech Republic or Czechia, depending on your preference, versus plain old Denmark. They're unbeaten against the Czechs since a 3-0 defeat at Euro 2004. They're great at home as well, unbeaten in 17 matches. And actually, Duncan, this is a bit like the Italy-Bosnia game in that you look at it and think if you get through this game, you might have a decent chance of having a good run in the World Cup. They're going to a group containing Mexico, South Africa and South Korea. South Korea obviously got a bit of World Cup heritage and Mexico as a host, but still, you might fancy Czech Republic or Denmark to be able to squeeze past and into the knockouts.
Yeah, particularly with potentially 3 teams going through from the group as well. So, yeah, I mean, Czech Republic took a while to wake up, didn't they, against Ireland? But as you say, their home record's really good. But I mean, Denmark should have won their group. They should be there already. So I think this is the hardest one to call of the 4, and possibly could be the most entertaining game as well. So both these teams would expect to be at World Cup, so it's not like a sort of Bosnia or a Kosovo or a Wales situation where that it's just a dream. It's very much like we should be there, but this is their last chance.
They're all the UEFA ones are pretty hard to call, right? And that's sort of the point, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there's lots to dislike about the expansion of the World Cup. The fact that it's now a 48-team tournament, which let's face it, will only serve to dilute the quality and leave us waiting for sort of high quality matchups longer than you would have to wait ordinarily at a World Cup. But the fact that the qualifying process has still thrown up these very evenly matched playoff ties between lots of really decent teams suggests that the balance perhaps hasn't been completely skewed by the fact that it's an expanded tournament.
Sweden against Poland in Path B, more pertinently at the magnificently monikered Strawberry Arena. Imagine telling a West Ham fan back in September that Graham Potter would be 90 minutes away from the World Cup. It really is a funny old game. Potter's Sweden stank out qualifying. They're now just a pole vaulting away from the finals though. Daniel, Gyökeres and Lewandowski both scored in the semis. How reductive am I being by asking if this is just about which of the pair packs their shooting boots?
Having watched Poland over the last 15 to 20 years at major tournaments, it's pretty much always been about Lewandowski, and I suspect that will continue. Gyökeres scored a hat-trick in the semi-final, but in general, I watched that game and Sweden looked really, really good. I don't know exactly what part has changed, but speaking to someone after the game, they said like the whole mood of the team just feels completely different. That qualifying group was such a disaster that it ending and kind of still leaving them with a shot at something because of the Nations League, they'd sort of completely turned focus on these playoffs now, and they looked absolutely ready for it. They looked like they've been preparing it for a long time. I think they'll beat Poland. Poland just, they all just look a bit one-dimensional when I've seen them, as I say, for a long, long time. I think Sweden will do this. And fair play to Graham Potter. It was an interesting job to take. He took it on a really short-term basis, and then they offered him longer. If he takes Sweden to the World Cup, they have got the tools within that squad, particularly in an attacking sense. If Alexander Isak gets himself fit, that they, it's quite easy to see them. They're going to be like the Turkey, aren't they? They're going to be like the dark horse that everybody calls a dark horse until they eventually do nothing and everyone tries to forget that they predicted they were a dark horse.
Rich USA heritage at World Cups as well, Sweden, of course. Duncan, haven't they? Everything was better in the old days, and third place in 1994. Many happy memories of your Brolins, your Darlings, etc.
Yeah, what an era that was. I preferred their performance in USA 94 to Euro 92, where, upset my young mind.
Lol. The final UEFA playoff is Kosovo against Turkey. Turkey can reach the finals for just the third time, or Kosovo could mark a decade of being a FIFA force by making it onto the grandest stage of them all for the first time ever. Again, sort of difficult to pick a favourite for this one, Tom. Is there a team you'd rather see in Canada, the USA and Mexico? Kosovo bring the intrigue, Turkey bring the noise?
I mean, Kosovo is a great story. Like you say, 10 years after becoming an independent football nation, and they go into this off the back of that incredible, 4-3 win over Slovakia, away from home in their playoff semi-final. But there's so much talent in this Turkey team. You look at the players in that lineup, Arda Güler, Kenan Yildiz. You feel like they could potentially do something really special. And I think if they do qualify, they will be right in the mix for dark horse chat as they always are. And it wouldn't be a major tournament if people weren't tipping Turkey to be the dark horses, only for them to be immediately eliminated. So that's another reason to get behind the Turks.
Although for Kosovo, obviously they're going to group with USA and Australia.
They got good dark horse potential as well.
Yeah, but also I imagine Americans and Australians would pronounce Kosovo in quite different
Kosovo.
way. So I'm looking forward to that if it happens.
You got a dark horse, Daniel, as it stands at the moment, that's not in the usual pack?
Dark horse World Cup, that feels like putting me on the spot. I will say my dark horse rolls a dice and picks out Colombia.
Nice.
No, I have to say, like in preparation for the podcast, I was just like looking through some World Cup stuff. I can't believe that France are longer odds to win it than England. I mean, having not just because of recency bias in the past week, but also most of my life. You look at the two attacks Tom knows it, but the two attacks that France picked the other night in different halves, it just blew my mind that they're not favourites for the World Cup.
England started a Dominic and replaced him with a Dominic, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Fair enough.
France
stand down.
France no longer have a Dominic, so maybe they should be heavier favourite. Intercontinental playoffs, Bolivia against Iraq. Iraq have only ever been to the World Cup once. Bolivia looking to reach their fourth. Also, Jamaica against DR Congo on Tuesday night. I'm confused about this, Duncan. Why didn't Steve McLaren stick around for this? I thought he left because he thought they had no chance. Is he that high on DR Congo and that low on the Reggae Boys?
It's slightly confusing, but I think he just, he fell on his sword. Maybe for the greater good.
Not on his umbrella.
Well, in many ways, he's become a human umbrella for Jamaica's chances of reaching the World Cup. come at one with the device.
Beautiful. We'll round up, of course, everything that happens in those various World Cup playoffs on Thursday's show when Jimbo will be back in the hot seat. And now they're nearly done. Elsewhere, a new survey has revealed that 3 out of 4 fans want VAR to be scrapped. 92% of fans surveyed agreed that VAR has removed the spontaneous joy of goal celebrations. 82% of them strongly agreed. 85% of match-going fans strongly disagreed that VAR decisions are generally resolved in a reasonable amount of time. Daniel, big element of tell us something we didn't know about this, and it's going to matter not, is it, in the grand scheme of things? It's here to stay.
No, yeah, Pandora's box. VAR is, from the moment it started, it was only ever going to grow, and if we can stop its spread, then we should consider that a minor success in a sea of defeats. And yeah, I mean, I want to speak to the 8% of people who don't think it affects their celebration of a goal when it's there. Like, I want your confidence. I want your lack of self-doubt. Like, these are people who celebrated goals without looking towards the linesman back in the day to see if there's an offside flag, and I am jealous of them. But yeah, it is. I mean, I do suspect the survey of, you know, if you're someone who answers that survey about VAR, you're probably more likely to err on the side of being angry than answering it saying, yeah, I actually think it's all right. But it's clear, you know, you just have to take a sample size of everyone you've ever met and take 10 of them who like football, and at least 8 or 9 of them will say, I don't like VAR, and I didn't want it introduced, and I don't want it to grow. And as I say, if we avoid the corners and the, you know, second yellows and all that stuff, then we should consider that a small victory.
Harking back to France, Colombia, it feels like a great opportunity for FIFA to get a sponsored VAR break or two into the World Cup, doesn't it?
I mean, I'm sure those discussions are taking place as we speak. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Daniel. I agree with the sizable majority of respondents to that survey. The difficulty now, of course, if we were to bin VAR, which we obviously should do, we'd be getting the genie back in the bottle. And there are certain things that I think even fans who are desperate to bin it off would struggle with the reversion to a pre-VAR age, because, you know, there are things we've got used to. I mean, offsides, for example, offsides are now more accurate than they've ever been because the decision is being made by a robot rather than a human being. If you could make that quicker, if you could speed it up, then I'd be in favour of retaining that. But yeah, I think for me, the biggest tragedy of VAR has been the fact that, you know, goals no longer have any sense of permanence. It used to be the ultimate full stop to every sentence in every football match. The ball is in the back of the net, and if the flag doesn't go up and the referee doesn't blow his whistle, the goal just stands. Whereas now,
yeah, but the flag does go up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You would have a period of a few seconds grace during which time a goal could potentially be ruled out, but invariably wasn't. Okay. Whereas these days, goals, perfectly valid-looking goals, get ruled out quite routinely because something has happened that no one has noticed 15, 20, 30 seconds before the ball ended up in the back of the net, and it is very bad.
Counter-argument. You sometimes get to celebrate goals twice. You never used to be able to get.
That's not.
That doesn't make up for the fact.
Yeah,
that
we scored a goal. Oh, they're just checking it, but I think
gusto.
it's probably going to be fine. They're checking it. Oh, they're still checking it. Oh, it is fine. Yeah, we celebrate again.
That's not a reason to keep
extra joy.
That's like, Duncan. That's like starting Christmas dinner, the best meal of the year, then going out for a walk for an hour, coming back, eating the rest of it cold, and being like, 2 Christmas dinners, winner.
It's not really like that, is it?
Not really, no.
One place they don't have VAR is the WSL. Big weekend there. Man City moved a step closer to clinching the title. They beat Man United 3-0 at Old Trafford. Arsenal, also the proud owner of bragging rights, they hammered Spurs 5-2 at the Emirates. That was on Saturday, as was Liverpool's derby victory. They won 3-2 at Everton. There was a 4-3 thriller at Kingsmeadow on Sunday afternoon, and a bit of history as well. Duncan, you'd like this, between Chelsea and Aston Villa. The first game in the WSL to have both teams score 3 times in the first half. There was only 1 goal in the second, Shuken Nusken curling in the winner in the 82nd minute. And that is just about that for today. Thank you to Dan and Felipe for joining us earlier, to Lucy and to Jake in the booth, and producer Xavi, and of course Tom, Daniel and Duncan. Jimbo back on Thursday. For now though, it's ta-ta.
The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.